In today's video, we'll be doing no knead bread. It's a really simple bread type to make. It's a very simple recipe, only has 4 ingredients, but it gives you wonderful bread that looks like this. I'll tell you, this stuff is absolutely fantastic. If you love bread as much as I do, you're gonna wanna stay tuned. All right, so let's get started, you guys, with making this really easy, really fun to make, and awesome tasting bread. This is a no knead bread recipe, so there's a lot fewer steps, and it's going to be very simple for the first time bakers, first time bread makers. Hopefully you guys at the end of this will see how simple it is, and you guys will try it at home as well. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So in my bowl here, I have 3 cups of flour. You can use any type of flour that you like. This is just a bleached white flour. You can use an unbleached flour, a whole wheat flour, semolina, whatever you like. And that will give you a different tasting bread depending on what type of flour goes into it. But all of them work really well in this recipe. Once you have worked with this a little bit, you can start making other types of bread out of this. Make an olive loaf or add sesame seeds. I do that, and I make like dinner rolls with sesame seeds, or even if you wanted to make a breakfast roll with some poppy seeds or something like that on it. It's really awesome. You can do a lot with this very basic, simple recipe. So to my 3 cups of flour, I am now going to add 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. And this can be any type of yeast that you like. Again, this recipe is extremely flexible and versatile. You can use any type of yeast that you like. Doesn't have to be any special brand or anything like that. And so I'm going to add in 1/4 teaspoon of yeast to this. I am going to mix this up with just a knife, just to mix it around. And then to this, I am going to add, you need to add a full teaspoon of salt. Now for me, I'm using kosher salt, and it has, it's not the finest crystals. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to mix my salt into my water. Normally in baking, salt is considered a dry ingredient, and so you would add it directly to the flour and yeast. But because my salt has larger crystals to it, a lot of times with a dough and a recipe like this, the salt tends to not dissolve enough. And since you don't need this dough to move everything around, you can sort of get pockets in there that are saltier than other areas that have less flavor. So I am going to take 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to put that right here into a measuring cup. And to that, I'm going to add 1.5 cups of hot water. This can be plain old hot water right from the tap. You don't need to use cold water. I know that if you've seen other videos on these no knead bread recipes, a lot of times they use cold water. And because they use cold water in those recipes, it takes a lot longer for the dough to process on its own. So because we're going to be using this 1.5 cups of hot water, this dough is actually going to sort of be supercharged, and it's not going to take as long for the dough to get to the point where we can use it and get it in the oven. My thing is, I want my bread as fast as possible. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do 1.5 cups of water. And that is about right. And we're going to go ahead and add that in. And that's, again, just hot water from the tap. We'll mix this up. And with this dough, you really just want to just bring everything together. So if you see here, it's still got a little bit of soupiness to it. But as we mix this in and incorporate all of that flour into the dough and into the water, you'll see that it comes together quite nicely. And normally I'd be using a spatula for this. The butter knife just happened to be there because I was measuring out the flour and using the back side of the butter knife to level off my measuring cup. So this is going to sit. Put that in there. All right, so this is going to sit on the countertop for 3 hours. So take this, you want to put it covered. I typically cover mine with a kitchen towel. You can also cover it with some cling wrap or some sort of a plastic wrap. That is perfectly fine. I have one here that I made earlier, so I'm just going to trade these out. And you can kind of see what this, it just looks like, you know, Play-Doh or something like that. So this is what you want it to look like. If you look under here, and hopefully this is reading on the camera, you can see all of these great air bubbles under here. That's how you know that your yeast has done its job. Those air bubbles are created by the yeast as it's breaking down the flour, and it's actually consuming the flour, and a byproduct of that consumption is gas. And that's what we have here. Now that we have this, you want to take your dough out. You want to put your dough on a floured surface. I'm actually going to bring out my cutting board here. And you just want a little bit of flour. That should be fine. So just a well-floured cutting board, or I could have done this right on the countertop. And then you just want to dump this right on out. And as you can see, this is all coming out together. I don't have any, it's not very liquid and as it was going in, because I used the kitchen towel. If you used cling wrap, sometimes I've done that and the dough still has a bit of moisture, a bit more moisture to it. When I use the towel, the dough doesn't have as much moisture to it, and so it's a lot easier to work with once you get to this point. Now you want to keep this bowl. You don't want to wash this because we're going to need this in just a minute. But you just want to take the dough, flour your hands, and you want to just mold this dough into a loaf. I also take that the dough and kind of roll it under and onto itself. Put it back down, roll it around, get a little bit more flour on my hands. So the reason why I do that is because sometimes that very top of the dough can be a little bit drier, and you just want to kind of mix that in so it's not completely dry on the top when you get ready to turn this out and turn your dough in. So we're going to take this, and just like this, you want to take it and bring your hand under. Okay, and then you want to bring this back. Got a little spot there. All right. And it's dough. It's supposed to be a little sticky. That's perfectly fine. I probably needed a little bit more flour on my hands. And so here we have it. Leave that sit there for just a second. Let me get some of this dough off my hands. And then you want to just take a piece of parchment paper. You're going to take that parchment paper and line the bowl that this dough just came out of. We're just going to take a sheet of parchment paper like so. And we're going to take this, line the inside of the bowl. And then we're going to take our bread, our dough here, and we're going to set it right inside that parchment paper in the bowl. We're going to take this and we're going to cover it again for another 30 minutes. At the same time, we are going to preheat our oven to 450 degrees. And we're going to allow this to sit for the 30 minutes while the oven is preheating. You want to take the pot that you're going to cook your bread in and put it in the oven while it preheats. You want this pot to be very, very hot so that way you get a nice under crust on your bread. Otherwise, what will happen is that your bread will be baked, but the underside of it won't be fully cooked. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the oven and get my oven preheating, cover that up with a towel, and I'll be right back. All right, you guys, so 30 minutes has passed. Our pot is preheating in the oven. So this is our bread dough that's been sitting for the last half hour on the countertop. Again, it just looks like the dough did before. We are now going to take the pot out of the oven. You don't want to leave your oven open for too long because you will end up letting out the heat. So you want to take the top off of your pot. And then now we're just going to set this entire parchment paper with the bread in it right inside. You're going to hear a bit of a sizzle. That sizzle is because the pot is hot. And that's what's going to give you that really great crust on the bottom of your bread. We're just going to cover this. And it's perfectly okay if the paper sticks out a little bit. That's fine. Now, a lot of you guys know that I said to preheat your oven to 450 degrees. Mine is actually set to 500, and that's because my oven at 500 degrees only gets up to about 460, 475 degrees. So I actually use an oven thermometer, so that way I'm making sure that I'm baking my bread and other things that I have to bake at the proper temperature. The other reason that I set mine to 500 degrees is because every time you open your door to your oven, it's going to let out a bit of heat. And by compensating for that, it means that my oven can heat back up to the necessary temperature much faster. So now that we have our bread in the oven, you want to bake this bread for 30 to 35 minutes covered. After you bake your bread for 30 to 35 minutes, you are going to then uncover it and allow it to bake for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, even up to a half an hour. Baking your bread uncovered at the end, that final step, is what's going to determine how crispy your bread crust is going to be. So depending on what you like and the type of bread that you like, you may want to leave it uncovered for 10 or 15 minutes like I'm going to do today at the end, or you can leave it there for 30 minutes if you like your bread to be really, really crusty, like a French baguette has that really nice crisp crust to it. So stick around. I'm going to show you what this bread looks like when it comes out of the oven. Okay, you guys, so we're back. It's been about 30 minutes now. I'm going to go ahead and take the bread out of the oven. What we're going to do next is we're going to just remove that parchment paper. We're going to put it back in the pan and we're going to bake it uncovered for about 15 minutes. And so this is what the bread will look like when you take it out of the oven. It's a little blonde, but that's fine. We're going to brown it up when we put it back in. I'm going to use my towel because this bread is hot. And then we're just going to put this back in uncovered for another 15, maybe even 20 minutes. All right, you guys, so we're back. We're almost at the end of this journey. I'm going to get the bread out of the oven. It's been another 10, almost 15 minutes. So I'm going to get the bread out of the oven. It looks really, really wonderful. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, and then we're going to let the bread cool down, okay? So when your bread comes out of the oven, it's going to look something like this, okay? It's wonderfully toasty on the top. I hope you guys can hear that. Oh, it's just absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to put the top back on this pan, and I'm going to let this bread cool down naturally, and then I'll be back to slice into this bread to show you guys exactly what it's going to look like. Oh my goodness, you guys. So we're back. The bread is finally finished. It's finally cool. I'm going to take it out of the pot. And this is what it sounds like. I hope you guys can hear this. You hear that wonderful crispness? Now, I'm gonna take this and put it back on my cutting board here. We're just gonna take a nice bread knife, and you can see, it's just amazing. This bread is so wonderful. I made this bread myself. You guys can make this bread. It tastes great. I'm gonna get some butter out of the refrigerator to put on this, but this is, and it's still a little warm. There's still a little bit of steam coming off of it. This is absolutely wonderful with an olive oil herb mix. It's great with just butter or just to make a sandwich or to have with soup. It is just phenomenal. So I hope that you guys will try this. And I want you guys to really enjoy this bread and enjoy my channel. I'm glad that you guys are here for this next video. And thank you so much to all of my new subscribers. My channel is only a few weeks old, and right now I'm up to 9 subscribers. Remember, you guys, I can't see your name. It doesn't show up in the list if your settings are set to private. So these are the people who I did get the alerts for. Raina Renee, thank you so much for joining and for subscribing. Aaron Garland, thank you so much. Justin Blackwell, I'll see you on Monday. Casey Thompson, I can't wait to see you again. We got to do brunch really soon. Crazy to the Max, who's one of my friends from a gaming community, as well as Mo Jones. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to the channel. I hope that you guys are getting a lot out of this. I really hope that you guys will leave comments so that I can continue to make this channel get better. I am in it for all of you guys, and hopefully you guys are getting a lot from the content that I'm providing. You guys have a great week.